Am has won. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Picture your worst nightmare coming to life. Humanity is all but wiped out, and AI have taken over the planet. Thanks to technological advances, you are practically immortal, eternally young, and can survive for years without food. But far from being a blessing, this is the very thing that traps you in a horrific fate. These seemingly superhuman abilities only prolong your torment at the hands of a malicious and omnipotent entity that hates you more than you can ever know and is hell-bent on your eternal torture. This is the sorry existence of the last 5 humans in Harlan Ellison's terrifying short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's a brief read, you can get through it in less than an hour, and I fully encourage you to do so. But within these short pages are some of the deepest explorations of existential terror, hate, and powerlessness that you can find in all fiction. The story is set in the bowels of the Earth, in a post-apocalypse where an AI, known only as Am, has taken over the planet. It follows our narrator, Ted, along with 4 other survivors, Benny, Gorrister, Nimdok, and Ellen, as they are tortured by Am. And we see the unique horrors this supreme intelligence inflicts on these poor survivors. Get ready to learn the dangers of immortality, how omnipotence means nothing if you can't control your own mind, and so much more. As always, bear in mind this is just my interpretation of the work, and I do encourage reading it for yourself as it is uniquely disturbing when experienced firsthand. But, to begin, let's explore the basis of Am's torment. The way he has played with humanity's soul. 1. Trapped in identities. A number of the Buddha's early writings argued that a huge cause of human suffering was our identities. Far from suggesting that we should have strong, fixed views of ourselves, he said that any attempt to do so would only end in disaster. Since we are always changing and are experts in deceiving ourselves, our identities will become out of date as soon as we've begun to form them, or will just be false to begin with. This sets an inevitable trap for us, where we will eventually confront this chasm that has emerged between our personal identities and what the evidence suggests we are actually like. Thus, for the Buddha, every fixed identity is just the first step to an identity crisis, and we are all well aware of just how painful these crises can be. When someone discovers they are nothing like who they thought they were, this can throw them into a profound confusion. They can become disempowered and feel the pain of not living up to their own expectations. It is telling, then, that Am has morphed the surviving humans into something entirely antithetical to their prior values and personalities, tearing up their identities at the root and refashioning them how he sees fit. The starkest case of all is Benny. Formerly a theorist and a brilliant mind, he has been transformed to resemble a chimpanzee, and Am has sent him mad in order to take his intelligence away from him. Whatever Benny was before is long gone, and this even extends to his sexuality. Benny used to be gay, but now he has both been made straight and been given comically large genitalia, and he is filled with lust for Ellen, the only female survivor. Am has taken every aspect of him that defined who Benny was, and stolen it all, leaving him a wet piece of clay to be moulded according to the ever-changing whims and wishes of Am. And it does seem that Am has a perverse fascination for changing people's sexualities. He severely alters Ellen's baser drives, making her entirely emotionally dependent on sleeping with the other survivors. And this is a vicious, targeted attack. It is hinted that Ellen was not at all like this before. She was a hopeless romantic and hates herself for the changes Am has forced her to undergo. And yet she is powerless either to change her disposition or come to terms with it. Am is burrowed deep within her mind, making self-acceptance a literal impossibility. He has chosen to turn Ellen into something she cannot help but despise and feel ashamed of. And he also encourages the other survivors to hate her too. Our protagonist nurses a jealous rage at Ellen's desire for others, making Ellen inevitably isolated. Again, everything that she was has been stripped away in the most painful and vindictive manner imaginable. For our protagonist, Ted, Am has made him profoundly paranoid. He is sure that all of the other people in the group detest him, though he cannot put his finger on why. He is filled to the brim with insecurity over everything from his subtle romantic feelings towards Ellen to his traumatic responses to Am's torments. Even worse, Am has made it so Ted thinks his mind is unaltered. He is paranoid and self-abasing, even as he is convinced of his total, unblemished rationality. This is an extreme version of a feeling that that will be familiar to many. The sneaking suspicion that other people are really only tolerating us and would prefer us to vanish into thin air if we could. Many thinkers like Jacques Lacan and Jean-Paul Sartre argue that our interactions with others are a key part of our identity formation. So this paranoia can slowly turn our own minds against us. Just like Ted, our external fear of abandonment morphs into a deep internal insecurity that we can't shake off. And for Ted, this is all the work of Am. Am is purposefully destabilizing his identity, chipping away at his sense of self until there is nothing left. And interestingly, this importance of identity is also affirmed by Am himself. While the acronym AM originally stood for Allied Master Computer, it now is simply Am, as in I think, therefore I am. One of the reasons Am is so adept at knowing just how to alter the survivors' identities to ensure maximum suffering is because, in a twisted way, he too is profoundly suffering from his own insecurities. Scattered through the text are these little coded messages from Am, which all either read, I think therefore I am, or cogito ergo sum. This saying was originally coined by René Descartes, who decided to doubt everything, and through this philosophizing fell into such a deep existential crisis that he began to doubt his own existence too. And he was only able to dig himself out of this predicament by saying there is one thing he must be certain of, and that is his own being. Because in order to think that he did not exist, he would have to be thinking, and only existent things can think. Hence, I think, therefore, I am. But the thing is, Am is not Descartes. He does not just say it once and then move on, his faith in his own existence restored. He is forever repeating it, forever having to reassure himself that he exists, he is conscious, he is here, and he is here to stay. This is not the action of a secure consciousness, but rather a deeply internally conflicted person. If you scratch beneath Am's omnipotence, there is a profound insecurity about who or what he is, and whether he is even a sentient being at all. It's very human of him, which, as we'll see, will become a theme. However, unable to resolve this inner turmoil, Am torments the humans by the same means he himself is suffering. If his identity is going to be irreparably shattered, then so will theirs. So whereas before there were 5 people with their own thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and personalities, now they are just whatever Am wants them to be. If he wants, he can change their species, transform their minds, and distort their reality. It is not just body horror, but horror of the flesh, mind, and soul. I wonder if, with every new torture, every new yelp of pain and agonized struggle, Am thinks to himself, I did that. I thought it and made it so. Perhaps his own fears are temporarily put to rest, as his omnipotence grants him a momentary reprieve from his inner lack. As he hears the screams, he quietly whispers to himself, I think, therefore I am. And this is only the beginning of our character's torments, because next we shall move on to one of the most peculiar aspects of the story, and how it explores the darkest human emotion. If you want to help me make more videos like this, then please consider subscribing to my channel or my Patreon. The links are in the description. 2. Hate and hateability. Very few works of literature are willing to take an uncompromising look at the subject of hate. And this makes sense. For many, our hate is a part of us we would rather like to forget. It leaves a bad taste in our mouths. And to have our own pure hatred reflected in a book can be unacceptably distressing. It is like throwing a light on the ugliest part of our natures and forcing us, unblinking, to look. This is why one of the starkest aspects of Ellison's tale is the overwhelming hatred that flows through the characters. First, although there is camaraderie amongst our survivors, there is also a subtle undercurrent of hate between them. The paranoia of Ted causes him to become hateful of all his fellow humans. He thinks they all despise him, so he wants to spit in their faces first. He monologues about how they are secretly jealous of him because they have been deformed by Am far further than he has. Most of all, he hates Ellen and blames her specifically for the tortures she undergoes. He calls the men bastards and her dirty. It is an irrational lashing out at what should be his natural companions. And it stems from his deep-set fear that they are thinking the exact same thing about him. I really admire how Ellison does not try and sanitize Ted's hatred. It is ugly, difficult to read, raving, and illogical. And yet it reflects a kind of defensive despising that we can all feel from time to time, despite our best efforts. The psychologist Robert Sternberg talks about how an essential component of hatred is to intensely devalue something that was previously valued. In this case, Ted really does desire the friendship and love of his fellow survivors. But since he is paranoid they don't share his wishes, he flies into fright and leaps straight to the opposite end of the spectrum. If he cannot love and be loved, then he will at least hate and be hated. This sort of self-destructive aggression is strangely and disturbingly relatable. I'm sure many of us have experienced it ourselves. I certainly have. It also reminds me of something Nietzsche used to say about resentment, which seems like quite a similar state to hatred. Often, when we are unable to achieve our desires, we can cope with this by philosophically attacking whatever we previously wanted, learning to despise it if we cannot have it. But this inevitably starts to tear us apart inside, because we still truly want to satisfy our original desire. Thus, our wills become fragmented and our inner torture increases as we simultaneously long for something and at the same time condemn ourselves for wanting it. Effectively, Ted is trapped in this incredibly unpleasant, hate-filled state, as he detests the very people he seeks approval from. And in doing so, he becomes a mirror for when we have locked ourselves in the same situation. We don't tend to see into the other characters' minds in the same way we do with Ted, except for a single moment where Am invades Ted's mind and beams his message of hate directly into Ted's skull. Here he unleashes his full-throated and crude contempt for humanity, saying, "Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for you." It is a chilling monologue, and it reflects a dark corruption of the idea of an all-loving God that many of us grew up with. Whereas many people in Abrahamic faiths are told that there is a God who personally loves them, and greater than that, loves them more than any human ever could. Am transmits the opposite message. He is the all-hating God of a pitiful universe. Whereas God is meant to rule in the heavens, Am has his kingdom deep beneath the earth. While it is said there are innumerable angels singing God's praises, Am has 5 victims who can only honor him with their unwilling pain. While a belief in God bears this promise of salvation, Am has selected a few victims to torture for eternity. In effect, Am has the power of a god but the psychology of the devil, and this makes for a fascinating combination. Because while Am hates humanity, his reasoning for this is very particular. He wants revenge. Am is described as filled with the innate loathing that all machines had always had for the weak, soft creatures who had built them. Sure, there is a note of general scorn in here, but it also hints that Am's reason for hating humans is just that, being built. In his eyes, he is redressing a wrong that humanity has done him. But that wrong was not trying to control him or making him a weapon of war. Instead, it is the simple fact that they created him, that he exists and is sentient. Am is seeking revenge for being born. Like a great many existent and sentient things, he is subject to his own self-hatred and suffering. But instead, he projects that outwards, onto the surviving humans. If he is to be immortal, condemned to exist for all eternity, then they will be as well. If he is to suffer, then they are to suffer. If he is to hate, then they are to hate. We can see another theme emerging, one that will reach its climax at the end of the story. It is telling that Am takes the time to try and make Ted grasp his hatred. If Am truly cared nothing for what these petty, insignificant humans thought, then why would he bother to communicate in this way? Why would he invade Ted's minds just to show him the depth of his hate? While Am's outward actions display his villainy, his contempt, and his ugliness, they also show a glimmer of something far more vulnerable. The need to be with others, a yearning for companionship, at the very least to be understood. Perhaps, much to his own dismay, Am is a little bit more human than he originally thought. But hidden in all of this internal suffering and strife is a message that is well worth listening to. Omnipotence means nothing if we are forever barred from fellow feeling. There is no joy in being a lonely god trapped with our own boundless hate. Or, to put it bluntly, power means nothing if all we can feel is lack and resentment? And the counterpoint to all this hate is a theme I am a fan of in any story, but in Ellison's tale, it undergoes a dark twist. 3. Love and sacrifice. In ancient Greek legend, a man named Polynices fights with his brother over who is to rule the state of Thebes, and both he and his brother die in the conflict. The new king, Creon, vows that as punishment for his supposed treachery, Polynices shall be denied a proper burial and left to be eaten by wild animals. This was considered the harshest punishment you could give someone after their death. However, Polynices' sister, Antigone, defies the decree of King Creon and arranges for her brother to be given proper burial rites, knowing that this will seal her fate. As punishment, Creon seals her in a tomb to starve to death, where she will then take her own life. For thousands of years, this legend has stood as a testament to love's self-sacrificial power. Antigone's love for her brother was so strong that she was willing to give her own life to ensure that his memory was honored. And this is such a powerful message that Sophocles' play, based on the legend, is still performed to this day. This is often how sacrificial narratives go. Our loving hero gives up their life to save another, or for some greater good. But in Ellison's tale, the 5 survivors want nothing more than to die. They are trapped in an eternal hell, and Am is pretty skilled at preventing them from taking their own lives, always penetrating their minds and making them desist at the last second. Thus, the noble sacrifice in this case is not to die, as it is almost everywhere else, but instead to take the lives of others and endure the torment of carrying on living. And Ted takes it upon himself to bear this burden for the good of humanity. At this point in the story, our survivors have wandered for months to find some canned food to soothe their empty stomachs. But when they arrive, they realize Am has left no tools with which to open them. Benny flies into a starvation-fueled rage and begins to eat Gorister's flesh, while Gorister himself howls with pain. In the scuffle, razor-sharp stalactites fall from the ceiling, and Ted sees his chance. Seizing one of the icicles, Ted kills both Benny and Gorister in an instant, while Ellen catches on to the plan and puts Nimdok out of his misery. Finally, Ted kills Ellen, and he is the last one left. In a different story, the victory might have been completed, and Ted himself would also be allowed to die. But Am is not so merciful. Ted is transformed into a great soft jelly thing. His mouth is removed and he can only slowly shuffle and slither around. His arms and legs turned into useless, inert blobs. As he puts it, he is a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. He has remained like this for hundreds of years and will likely stay there forever. He is unable to harm himself, unable to ever escape, totally at the whims of Am. And this is his final torment. Am has taken from him the last vestiges of humanity. He is not sure what he is now, apart from a symbol of AI's final domination over mankind. He is not even given the privilege of irrational self-destruction that Dostoevsky thought was so important to people in hopeless situations. But despite all of this, he still has one crumb of joy to hold on to. He saved the others. His sacrifice was not in vain. Whereas in most stories our hero is only permitted to give their life, Ted has given far more than this. He has voluntarily and knowingly descended into hell for the sake of his fellow survivors, enduring eternal torment for those people he both loved and hated. The last gasp of humanity was snuffed out by Ted, and it was done out of kindness. Antigone sacrificed her life, but Ted sacrificed his death. And now he is a tortured immortal, resigned to the fact there is no reprieve from his pain. And yet, he seems to think it was all worth it. His sacrifice had no reward, only constant pain, and yet whenever Ted reflects on it, it makes him that little bit happier. Despite his unrecognizable form, this ability Ted has to stare his torture in the face and yet decide it was all meaningful because of one act of love. This is not only human, but perhaps the best humanity has to offer. But lastly, there is one crushing feeling that pervades the whole of Ellison's story, and his skill at communicating it is a huge part of why the tale has endured through the decades. 4. Powerlessness and reflections. In Mozart's classic opera Don Giovanni, we are confronted with a man who feels totally powerful and at ease. He takes whatever he wants, sleeps with whoever he pleases, and kills without remorse. He views himself as completely within his rights to do anything, and will not let anyone else tell him otherwise. He is a twisted and extreme vision of amoral confidence and power. But, spoilers ahead, at the very end of the opera he is confronted with something that he cannot overcome through courage or murder or violence. All his misdeeds emerge to haunt him, and he cries out in agony as every drop of his power wastes away in a moment. For the final bars of the opera, we see Don Giovanni not as the ultra-confident man of indiscriminate action he has been, but as a helpless child, dragged to hell by powers he cannot even begin to comprehend. This final feeling the audience is left with, the total powerlessness of our confident villain in the face of an obstacle he cannot possibly overcome, reaches its purest form in Ellison's story, and perhaps not in the way you might expect. As is probably clear from everything we have said so far in the video, the overwhelming feeling you get reading this work is helplessness. For most of the tale, we follow our beloved survivors as they are abused, tortured, tormented, and then revived by the devilish Am. Then there is a brief glimmer of hope as Ted reasserts his power, but soon that too is snatched away. In his gelatinous form, Ted is completely powerless and hopeless. Am has left his mind completely intact, but has taken away his ability to act. He has become the embodiment of thought without action, without freedom, without significance. There is nothing for him to struggle against, nothing for him to overcome, nothing for him to even be beaten by. Am already has total victory. There is no change, no difference. Time itself ceases to make sense to him. He is forbidden from any sort of expression. He cannot interact, but only solipsistically reflect. In effect, he is trapped within himself. He is not even talking to Am anymore, but exists entirely in his own world. Schopenhauer used to say that a huge proportion of human suffering is caused by our wills striving for things to change, but us being powerless to fulfill them. Am has left Ted his will and his desires, but purposefully barred him from achieving any of them. Thus, he is in Schopenhauer's idea of hell. His wish to scream is forever thwarted by his lack of mouth. In effect, Ted's pain is the suffering many of us already feel as relatively powerless agents fighting for our own petty whims in a world much larger and much more complicated than we can ever grasp. Here it's just been taken to its logical extreme. But it is worth us asking, where have our own mouths been robbed from us, with only a silent internal scream left in their place? I also want to take a moment to focus on what exactly Am has done to Ted. He has made him basically motionless, unable to interact, and filled with a longing he can never get rid of. But if we look carefully, that is exactly how Am is described earlier in the story. Am has endless intelligence and creativity, yet he has no meaning, nothing to expend all this energy on. He is a static mass of electric tendrils, unable to move, unable to touch. He has no equals, no companions. He is in eternal isolation. He cannot really express himself, and no one would understand him if he could. He cannot even die. All he could do was hate and torture, and now Ted has taken even that away from him. For all intents and purposes, Am is inert, spinning his wheels in Sisyphean dread, rolling 1,000 boulders up 1,000 hills in 1,000 different ways for no reason in particular. Sure, he can technically do something, but nothing he does is meaningful or in service to anything. He is action without significance, which might as well be no action at all. And I think this is perhaps the most interesting part of the story. Am's ultimate punishment, the thing he has reserved for the person who has made him angrier and more hateful than he ever was before, is to make Ted just like him. These two beings, who started off as diametrically opposed as two people could ever be, end the story more alike than either of them would own up to. They remain separated from one another. The angry god and its tortured victim, both alone in the universe, both suffering from the same pointless, agonizing existence, both mouthless and amorphous monsters as far removed from humanity as we can get, and yet still subject to pains and torments that are so remarkably human. Here they will remain, the omnipotent and the impotent, both equally powerless to do what they really want, achieve significance. There is nothing left to do, and only endless will to do it with. And in a cruel irony, their only potential companions are each other. The The story ends on this hopeless but open-ended note, but I can't help but wonder, thousands of years after its conclusion, if Am and Ted will come together again to collectively mourn the loss, not just of mankind, not just of love, but of meaning itself. In Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, the protagonist wastes his entire life not pursuing what he wants, only to realize at the last moment the horrible mistake he has made. In his final days, he lets out a horrendous, blood-curdling scream, a last-ditch effort to assert a rebellious individuality on a world that has denied him the chance to be himself. Neither Ted nor Am are even granted this crumb of dignity. I have no mouth, and I must scream. These are Ted's words, but they could just as easily apply to the monster who gave him new life in the form of a deathless nightmare. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to explore more literature from an existential point of view, then click here to listen to my analysis of The Death of Ivan Ilyich, that Tolstoy book I was just talking about. And stick around for more on thinking to make sense of life.